What's going on, everyone? This is the Raikaza here. Today we're going to be covering over my full experience at the Pokemon Regional Championship over in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and how things turned out for us. Let's hop in. All right, full disclosure here is I have just recently flown back into town. I'm back in Arkansas. I'm trying to keep myself awake right now because I am supposed to be working night shift. So I'm trying to reflip my schedule. So it is kind of very difficult. So that's already one experience for me. It's very difficult playing in terms of the regional championships on a full daytime schedule when I just got off of a night shift type of schedule and trying to flip my body. So that's a bit of a challenge there. But flew into town, got here a little after midnight. It's now about 2 o'clock in the morning. I went ahead, hopped onto Showdown here and wrote out everybody's teams. Now, I don't have their exact move sets or anything like that written out, or their stats, because of course that was not revealed to me. But just certain highlights on some of the matches and how they actually took place is what I really want to go over here today, just so you can get an overall view of my experience at the Pokemon Regional Championship. Now, first and foremost, let's talk about the actual arrival. I left my hotel, had plenty of time, got to the venue about 45 minutes, it was about 45 minutes early. And I was trying to make sure I was getting there on time, get myself set up, being in the venue like I normally try to do. However, when I got off of the exit, there was so much traffic, it was insane. It was all funneling into one line from my direction. We had two lanes that we had to form into one, but then it was coming from the other direction that was making the right turn. So that's another lane that's still trying to form into one, which another hill that was coming from another area that was trying to fuse all into this one lane. And then when you get to the convention center, you turn into the convention center, and then there's yet another line of traffic coming the opposite direction, and that's all fusing as well. It was completely insane. I'm getting up to where I'm almost at the point where I can enter the actual parking garage. And as soon as I'm about to be there, it's already 30 minutes later, and they flipped the sign around, and the parking was full. So at that point, I'm like about to flip out, and I'm like, okay, I cannot believe this is happening when I've already left so early. But okay, here we go. Just drove down, saw people parking in some areas, but it said signs you needed a special permit. So I don't know if those people got tickets or not. I'm not sure what happened over there. But I found another parking garage. So went into that parking garage, got my ticket, put everything in there, and then booked it. And jogged over to the actual venue. Luckily, I'm actually capable of doing those types of runs there. Made it to the venue, and I had about 6 minutes to spare by the time I made it into the venue. So I'm hoping some people did not get any round one losses. I haven't looked into that, but it is possible that some people did actually get some round one losses because of the fact of how bad the traffic was. So with that being said, that is some unnecessary stress. And that's why, if you've seen my video before, when we conveyed the fact that you want to get to the venue early, you want to already have your way mapped out. I had already gone to the venue the day before, knew where I was going. I got there early, but yet it was still just apparently not early enough. Even though they said the venue opens at 8 o'clock, I was trying to arrive before 8 o'clock, and we were supposed to start by 8:30. It was just insane. It was just insane. But nonetheless, we made it. And then we had to get ready to start almost immediately. So that kind of added a little bit of anxiety in terms of getting ready into the first match. But let's go ahead and hop in on how some of these matches went down, and we'll take it from there. All right, so like I said, we're not going to be going into their actual movesets or anything, but these are just the Pokemon, in fact, of what they were actually using. So my first opponent was using an Amoonguss, Iron Hands, Urshifu, Rapid Strikes, Fluttermane, Chien-Pao, and a Pelipper. Now, this Pelipper was something I just put in there is the Wide Guard. So this Pelipper did have the Wide Guard. It also ran the Tailwind, and I believe it had the Protect as well. I can't remember if it, in fact, had the Protect. So it was a very niche battle in terms of me trying to figure out when he's going to use a wide guard, because my Regieleki is one of my top mons, especially for the speed control using that Electro Web. So first match though, he leads off with Amoonguss and Urshifu Rapid Strikes. So leading off with the Amoonguss and the Urshifu Rapid Strike, I already know he's going to more than likely try to go with some type of Rage Powder and allow his Urshifu to do some massive damage. So my whole focus was to try to make sure I maintain my speed control, because of the fact that he could potentially have that Flutter Mane in the back. And my team can have some struggles against Flutter Mane just depending on when my Pokemon come out. So right when our match actually begins, he goes ahead and leads off with the Urshifu plus the Amoonguss. So already my mindsets are trying to work around against my Regieleki. He's like, okay, he's probably going to run this type of Rage Powder and try to really shut down my Pokemon here, or my Ursaluna is going to get one shot because of this. So it was a very dangerous situation in order to be to work with there. So that match took a bit of pivoting around to allow my Urshifu to do enough damage, and while still preserving my Regieleki, because Regieleki I felt was most important because it gave me the speed control to stress about the Flutter Mane. Because one thing I've learned about how my team is actually going to operate is if I can quickly get off a Electro Web onto the Flutter Mane, and then later on Tornadus can come in and run the Tailwind, then my Ursaluna will be able to outspeed typically almost all Pokemon at that particular point. So, and I didn't know if he was going to be hiding that Pelipper also in the back. So I really wanted to make sure I preserved my Regieleki as much as possible. And once that Amoonguss was actually on the field with the potential of that Rage Powder, that was where I was having to really stress about that. But nonetheless, we were still able to pick up the victory in that match. Second round, I actually did a huge misplay because I believe he had the, I think it was like the Chen Pao plus the Urshifu, and I had my Ursaluna on the field, and for some reason, I was just like struggling with what I was going to do with my Ursaluna. I wanted to go ahead and swap it out to my Cresselia, but unfortunately, I ran out of time, and my Ursaluna went down in the first round, like as soon as the second match started in the first round, and I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Regieleki had to come back and really try to pick up these KOs and keep on surviving. It came down to the wire when he even did have the Pelipper, but I was getting into his mind just by the way I was playing, because I was using Volt Switch more so, even though Regieleki wasn't going to swap out anymore. But I was using Volt Switch, and he kept thinking, okay, I'm not using Electro Web, so he didn't opt in for the wide guard. So then I used the Volt Switch right when I needed to, and I was able to pick up the KO. And I believe he didn't even have a water attack. I believe he was only using Hurricane, if I recall. So his Pelipper had no way to actually defeat my Regieleki. So that was actually a perfect thing for me, and we were able to pick up the victory in that first match. So it was rough having that tough time with the timer, but getting into the groove, that's what it took. And then after that, we were able to pick up the victory. That was actually good. So that was the start of the momentum. Everything was going flow. Everything started flowing well. So then we move on to the second match. Now, the second match, this one was rough. As you can already see, we got ourselves a Brute Bonnet, this Slowbro, who is running a Slack Off, I wrote it down here, Slack Off, Iron Defense, and Trick Room. Can't remember if it was a Stored Power or if it was Body Press. I believe it was Body Press, because it wasn't doing much damage to my Terra Fairy Ursaluna, despite its boosts and stats. But this thing was just in the way. But then it also had an Enamorus, who must have had like either 0 speed or something of the sort. But that Enamorus was causing so much trouble. First match, I decided not to Terra for some reason. And when they got that Trick Room off, their Brute Bonnet was actually able to outslow my Pokemon. So therefore they were faster than me. and then it's loaded dice. I figured I was going to be able to just drain punch it, knock it out, would be good. But nope, it was able to out-slow me and then use its loaded dice bullet seed and bring my health way too low, and on a time when I didn't actually terror. So then I've learned the hard way, because I've never really had to taunt an oblivious Pokemon. Never really tried it before, but that just somehow went over my head, because he picked up the first victory in the first round. Second round came out. I was like, all right, I'm going to shut down this Slowbro real good. I sent out my Gyarados. I tried to use the taunt onto the Slowbro, and when it failed, and I'm like, oh, it doesn't work because Oblivious? I completely had wasted a turn. That just basically cost me the match, because it just downhill roll from there. Because I wouldn't have brought the Gyarados if I didn't know that it wasn't gonna work. I was really trying to use the Thunder Waves, which I did use the Thunder Waves really well, and I paralyzed the opponents. And if I was to gain a full para on one turn, then the victory would have been mine. On the second round, we would have went to game 3. However, I did not get the full para, and that was just RNG. Me just trying to pick up from the drop off that I had there. So it was just a tough match in terms of that, but it was definitely a learning curve. The fact that even though, yes, it says it on Showdown, but I hardly ever really look at the Oblivious ability, and now I know that you not only can you not intimidate it, you can't infatuate it, and you also cannot taunt a Pokemon with the Oblivious ability. So that's very important. So yeah, that's the whole thing. Moving on over to the third match. So at this point, I'm already 1-1. So I'm like, okay, that's just one loss. We can't really have any more losses. So let's just try to bring ourselves back up and let's truck along. But then we go against our third match, which is going to be a massive Trick Room team that's going to be running the Cresselia, the Torkoal, Iron Hands, Amoonguss, Ursaluna, as well as a Fluttermane. So this Fluttermane is also able to work very well in terms of speed, because when the Torkoal's out, the Photosynthesis will actually boost its speed, and it'll be able to outspeed my Pokemon. So this Pokemon was causing massive trouble, and I was trying to get my Tornadus in the field so I can actually run a Rain Dance to really shut things down. But my opponent started learning about how I was doing that and was swapping out the Torkoal. I at one point thought, I was like, I think he's going to swap back in the Torkoal and do all these things. But despite my prediction of it, I didn't go for it and do my attacks based off of that. And then it ended up costing me the round. So he actually ended up picking up the victory. And so then that put me at 1-2. So at that point, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is going to put me out of the tournament already. I'm like, this is that's where you get like really frustrated, because you're just like, oh my gosh, I came all this way, and I know my team is actually really good. I just need to make sure I'm playing the right way. What is going on? Because you've dealt with these teams before, you know what you need to do, but then it's just like, why? And but you know, it just is what it is, because you're going against somebody and they're trying to get into your head while you're getting into their head. So it just is what it is. That's just how that match actually turned out. Yes, this guy, he said that the match was mine, because we went to round 3. And towards the end of the game, that basically decided everything, he had his Fluttermane use Dazzling Gleam. Okay, both of my Pokemon were still in the green, and my Ursaluna as well as my Tornadus were both on field, so I was setting up the Rain Dance and using Earthquake. His Fluttermane used Dazzling Gleam. We were still both in the green. Everything's fine. And I'm like, all right, cool. All I need to do, I know he's probably going to try to bring this Torkoal again, so I'm going to just use the Rain again. And when he did that. He sent in the Torkoal. I activated the Rain again, so that's all I needed to do. And he did another Dazzling Gleam, and it got a high roll. And my Ursaluna, who was still in green from the first Dazzling Gleam, went all the way to 0. Not a crit, just a high roll. And if that did not happen, I was going to be able to knock out his Fluttermane, and then from that point on, activate a Tailwind, and my Ursaluna would have been able to decimate the rest of his team. That was a very, very frustrating last round of match number 3. And I was like, oh my gosh, that one has just caused me to more than likely be out of the tournament. And it's a complete gamble on terms of things, because you can't even predict that. You just ran the calculation, you're just like, okay, was that a high roll? Was that a low roll? You have no idea. You just see yourself very well surviving. You're like, oh, okay, cool. This is going to work out well. And then next thing you know, you just die. It just that's what happened. And I was just not having it. But, it was what it was. And, if my opponent and I both agreed that if he had just not gotten that high roll, the match was completely mine. And it was, I had the board position. So I know I played very well on that. It was just the fact of the calculation in the game. And it just is what it is in terms of that. The next match, so I'm already kind of down in the dumps, but I'm just like, okay, let me just go ahead and continue on. If I can somehow manage not to lose any more matches, then we should be good. So next round, then I go up against the Iron Hands, Flutter Mane, Chen Pao, Urshifu, Water, yet again. Or wait. Was that Urshifu Water? Yeah, that was Urshifu Water. Amoonguss, and a Landorus. So my opponent is actually running the Iron Hands and Flutter typically in the first round, and he's Terra his Iron Hands. So with that Terra, I'm utilizing that because I have my Ursaluna as well as my Regieleki, and I believe he was Terra Water, if I'm not mistaken. So I was able to start using Electro Web and then just zapping him. Because I'll protect on the first turn, just really gauge to see how the speed was going. And then he was trying to just see how I was going to do things too. So I was able to pick up the victory pretty cleanly in that round. And then even the second round, nothing too much to really go over in terms of that. We just went kind of back and forth, but it was a two round straight knockout that I was able to pick up the victory in that one. Second round, I believe he brought his Landorus to really try to shut down my Ursaluna, but with the swaps and plus my Regieleki having the Terra Blast Ice, it actually worked well, and I was able to knock out his Landorus and do the pivots appropriately and keep my stats the way I needed it to be. Then we go over to round 5, and this is a very difficult matchup for me. We have the Landorus that's still going to be... Oh, I actually did that wrong. So this is not that Landorus. It's the other. It's the Ethereum form. Don't know why I actually clicked the wrong one, but yep, there we go. So this is his team here. So he had the Landorus, Rillaboom, Flutter Mane, Iron Hands, Tornadus, and the Goldango. When he's leading out the Goldango and the Rillaboom, so he's setting up this grassy terrain. I can't really use Earthquake, even though I'm going to be forced to doing it anyway. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to run the Trick Room. But I know for a fact that he's probably going to do a Fake Out, which is what he does. He runs the Fake Out, and then he's doing a Nasty Plot. So part of me wanted to go ahead and swap out my Crest and send him my Ursaluna, because I can be able to just take the Shadow Ball because I'll be immune to it. However, I didn't know what his Rillaboom would do, because I pretty much figured that they were going to try to double down into my Cresselia to try to make sure I knock it out so I don't get the Trick Room up or anything. So at that particular point, it was going to be very difficult for me to do to swap it, and then it was just all the mind games at that particular point. I got in my head, and then once I see this Goldango and I would start trying to do the damage towards it, it just wasn't coming out. And once they got that Nasty Plot up, I'm still trying to protect, pivot in my Urshifu to even try to tank the hit, and it's tanking it. And Gyarados, I even brought Gyarados to try to shut things down. But of course, you can't status Goldango because of his good as gold ability. So you really have to just pivot it out. But then he's pivoting his Landorus to drop my attack stat as well. So I can't do anything against him. So at that particular point, his team was definitely a huge, it's a high-end counter for my team. So there's not really much that I can really do about that team. So that was kind of like a blowout at that particular point. So that was a clean 2-round straight victory towards my opponent. So at that point, that already put me at the 2-3. So I already knew I wasn't going to be doing necessarily anything for day 2. I think there's a very small chance that somebody can actually make it to day 2 with a 6-3 record. However, that's not typical. But you still at 6-3 can get good championship points. So I was like, okay, if I lose another round, I'm going to have to pull out of the tournament because there's other things that were also going on. But unfortunately, by this time, there was a Premier Challenge, a PC, that was actually going on. But that started at about 11 o'clock for anybody that already dropped. But by this point, this is already round 5. So we're hours in, so it's too late for me to actually drop at this point and to do that. So I'm like, okay, let me try my best and see if I can make it to where I can get championship points towards Worlds if I can still just maintain myself at 6-3. Doing that, however, was going to mean that I can't lose a single not another match. So then we go over to round number 6. Round number 6 has the Iron Hands, Urshifu, that's Urshifu Water, Heatran, Tornadus, Chien-Pao, as well as the Farigiraf. And Farigiraf is a Pokemon that I actually think I would do want on this team that I was using, because that Farigiraf ability of the Armor Tail would definitely help shield my team, because there's one thing that I've learned of my team, what it's actually very weak to. I know in the previous video I talked about that it's very weak to electricity, but I also will say that my team is weak to if an opponent sends out both a fake out user plus an Urshifu, because at that point I can't protect and I can't necessarily guarantee what I'm trying to do, because they can fake out whatever setup I'm trying to do and that Urshifu can typically Terra and do some massive damage, or vice versa, or they can double into a certain Pokemon. It's just not a good place for me to be in. And that's something that my team needs to be able to resist, is these fake out users in some form or fashion. So I think Farigiraf is a very, very, very good Pokemon. And I've already got mine leveled up to level. I actually already had one, and I have another one now leveled up to 100. But I need to figure out what kind of stats I want it to have. So I'll be working on that in the end, and I'll be building new teams when Regulation E comes out. But nonetheless, we'll go ahead and talk about this match here. Round number 6. So my opponent brings in the Chien-Pao and the Tornadus, and I believe I had it was my Cresselia, and I was like, okay, I need to get some good damage off and just straight up just start going for some attacks there. And I flinch. I remember I was just like, I flinched right at the start of the match, and I was like, what? I was like, does this really have to happen right now? Really? The flinch just cost me the round. The round just went downhill. And I was like, no. Really? Really? I was like, okay. Then we go into the second round. And he starts off with his Farigiraf and Iron Hands. But at that particular point, I was like, all right, we're good. Double protect first turn, and just see what they wanted to do. And then if they wanted to Terra, I was going to immediately just start going for the Earthquake. If they wanted to use Trick Room, I was going to use the Trick Room to my own advantage. So from that point forward, I was able to just start knocking out his opponents, and I just got super duper serial and just really went at him, and was able to pick up the victory in both round 2 and round 3. So I was able to pick up the victory in that one. Because I did discover during round 2, once I got my Guts ability activated, my Ursaluna was able to one-shot his Urshifu. So once I was able to figure that out, it was all a done deal, because I can just Terra and not take too much damage from his Surging Strikes. So that was really, really good. I was able to pick up those victories there. Because I think in the third round, I used my Regieleki plus my Ursaluna. So I automatically was able to say, okay, whatever you are going to bring, I'm going to either shock it with my Regieleki, who was doing phenomenal with the speed control, shutting down the Urshifus and anything, and even the Landos with this Terra Ice, or my Ursaluna can then pick up the rest of the KOs if need be. So these two were doing fantastic together. Absolutely fantastic together. Then we actually moved on to round number 7. So my opponent here brings a Cresselia Gastrodon, which means, it's going to be very risky if I was going to try to bring my Urshifu, or even my Gyarados. They also have the Ursaluna plus the Heatran, plus the Fluttermane and their Tornadus. So as you can see, they have a half slow mode and a half fast mode. And the Heatran can actually be either or. So you never really know what a Heatran is technically going to do. So that's where things got a little dicey for me. And I was like, okay. But I felt as though he was going to be more so focused towards the Trick Room. But if he's seeing my team, he also will think that I'm running a Trick Room set. So he doesn't know how slow my Pokemon are. So that's where we both get into each other's minds. So it's like, okay, cool. So let's go ahead and we started our match. And he starts off with his Gastrodon Heatran. I start off with my Regieleki and Ursaluna. But sometimes I'll immediately go for an Earthquake, and I can protect the my Regieleki. But because of having both water and I didn't know how much damage that he would actually do, what I decided to do was switch out Regieleki, and I Terra'd my Ursaluna. And I still did the Earthquake, just in case if he didn't go ahead and Terra. But he did, and just did minimal damage, which was totally fine. And I sent out my Tornadus. So from that point, I was going to be able to have ultimate speed control. So I ran the Tailwind, and I was able to facade out the Heatran, and their Gastrodon's not able to do hardly much damage to me. Then I can actually pick up and clean KO the rest of the actual team. It got to where it was a very close call when his Ursaluna and his Fluttermane came out in the bat, but my team was still able to pick up the victory because then my Regieleki came back in later on, was able to shock down the Fluttermane, and then even though the Ursaluna, when it came back out, it was doing good damage, weakening my Pokemon, but I was able to do just enough chip so where by time my Regieleki came on the field, it protected, its burn chip went down. Then I finished off the Fluttermane, and then its burn they got me down to my Focus Sash. Burn finishes, got them lower again, and then I used my Terra Blast, even though it was just a regular normal attack, but it's still a high special attack from a Regieleki, and I was able to pick up the KO onto their Ursaluna. So it was a very close first round in that match number 7. But we were able to pick up that victory. And then from the second round, Fluttermane and Ursaluna came out first. Then Gastrodon and their Heatran. So they were doing Terraing their Ursaluna. Then they swapping to their Gastrodon. And I was trying to keep a track of where their Pokemon were in these regards. And I had my Cresselia and my Ursaluna. So from that point, I was like, okay, let me just do my own swaps by my ally switches and things of the sort, as opposed to me really struggling about, trying to do straight up damage immediately or trying to go for a Trick Room, because that was also a very risky play because of their own Ursaluna being on the field. So, being that said, I would also swap out bringing my Gyarados just to catch Intimidate onto their Ursaluna, just to drop their attack. But then I got crit by a Moonblast, so it dropped me drastically low on health. But then I sent in, then they were able to actually pick up the KO onto my Gyarados. So I sent in my Urshifu, expecting their Fluttermane to then do a Moonblast attack to it. But then I immediately swapped it back out, sent in my Cresselia, and hit an Earthquake to actually pick up the KO on the field. And from there, it was a clean victory from that point forward. So it was a very scary match initially, but I was able to pick up the victory, and we became 4-3 at that particular point. Then we move on over to our 8th match. And my opponent here decides to bring Tornadus, Heatran, Flutter, Urshifu, Rillaboom, and a Farigiraf here. So this team is, again, one of these difficult teams depending on how they were going to lead, because if they have the Rillaboom plus the Urshifu, then that would pretty much kind of shut my team down. But in both matches, my opponent did not lead with that. So because of that, his Tornadus and Flutter was, I believe, in the first round, but my Regieleki and my Ursaluna, we were able to get the speed control, do everything I needed to do my swap outs. Boom. And I was able to pick up the victory pretty well in that first round there. And I believe actually in that first round, I didn't even protect. I believe I just went straight for the Volt Switch onto the Tornadus and then swapped out and then immediately went for the Earthquake just to get the chip damage onto the Flutter Mane and brought in Microcelia. So therefore I can then just do my pivots and anything from that point forward, so I can pick up anything that I needed to, and then I'll protect in the next turn to stop the Rillaboom from doing any damage, and I can gain the speed control again from there. So it was a very smooth victory in that regard. We definitely had a very good run in that round. And then the next round they brought the Heatran, Rillaboom, Farigiraf, and Urshifu. So at that point, it became a point where I actually terrestrialized my Regieleki, even had to swap it out, and then had to say later on in the match when to send the Regieleki back in just so it can take the hit, faint, and then I can reposition myself. And I even remember writing it down saying I may have to sacrifice Regieleki on this turn, and I did. Then regained the control, succeeded, and was able to pick up the victory in terms of that round. So then at this point, we pick up another victory and hit up 5-3. And that is where the next match becomes the most stressful match of the day, because it is the match that determines whether or not you're going to get CP or not, because it depends on your ranking in there. That's the most likely that you're going to need to be in order to get championship points. So round number 9 goes against Lando, Urshifu, Iron Hands, Moongus, Fluttermane, and Heatran. And in this match, my opponent is just able to pretty well dominate in the first round. He got the Leaf Storm on his Amoonguss. It one-shot my Urshifu, which I was actually shocked with. Then, on top of that, he was even able to keep pivoting into his Landorus to really drop my attacks down. So, then even on top of that, he would run the Spores and somehow be able to keep me asleep for extended periods of time. It was so volatile in terms of that round. I was like, oh, this is just bad. This is just really, really bad. So then we go into the second round, and I am pivoting. He's pivoting. We're constantly pivoting. He keeps putting me to sleep, but it's not able to really do much to me with the Pokemon that he's putting to sleep and how much damage I'm doing to him. So he's having to swap out on the turns that I'm sleeping to try to regain health and using this Pollen Puff to regain health. We go all the way to time. He did stall out the time because he knocked out one of my Pokemon, and then when the timer showed up, I was like, oh my gosh, I've never had this happen on this. And he was able to stall it out long enough to where the time ran out, and since he had more Pokemon left over, he was able to get that victory. And that was very frustrating that the final round went down to time. It was kind of good because we did pivoting and it wasn't like a complete shutdown like how that first round was, but at the same time it was still annoying a little bit too. I was just like, crap, I'm really trying to pivot this thing to really try to regain the control if I can just get that awakening, but I would stay asleep for far too many turns nonstop, and it just didn't go in my favor. So in the end, we ended the Pokemon Regional Championship at 5-4. So it's not my best in terms of like how I know this team could perform. I know this team was definitely good enough for a minimum of 6-3, and definitely I know this team was good enough for at least a good 7-2, but definitely a 6-3. But nonetheless, it just did not turn out for us. But what we did do, and I didn't have any of their teams marked down or anything, I went to the mid-season showdown, which was held, I guess technically yesterday. So it was held on Sunday while the Day 2 event was going on. And we had a best of rounds of Swiss, 7 rounds of that. And I was able to Go against some really good opponents that barely made it as well. They only had like 6-3. Some of them had some championship points. A couple of them was like 5-4, but they're bringing their teams, just seeing if they can get some good championship points there. And I had some amazing matches, and I came out in that tournament at out of 7 matches, so that was 5-2. So in the regionals at Pittsburgh, I placed, I think it was like 164, somewhere around there, like 164, 167, or 162. I can't remember the exact number in the 160s, but it's in the 160s out of the 430 some odd people that were registered for that tournament. And for the midseason showdown that was held on the Sunday, that was out of 126 individuals, and I came out at number 27. So top 36 did get championship points, so I did get some championship points for that. I believe it was just 16. Not the most amount of championship points, but I mean, some is better than none. And I come to find out that your top 6 midseason showdowns will go towards Worlds if you do more than 6. They'll just wipe out the lowest scores that you got. So we are definitely now 16 points closer towards the World Championship. So that's good. And now what we just need to do is just continue building up on teams. I've already started getting some notes out for looking at some Pokemon that are going to be now viable in Regulation E. But we just need the DLC to fully release. We need to know what new moves or old moves are going to be making their full return, how to get access to those moves, and how many Pokemon are going to learn these moves, so we can actually start really building the meta again. Because the meta is about to change. Things I think are going to be very, very huge in this transformation. So one thing that I still find very frustrating coming to Regulation E is Walking Wake and Iron Valiant. Neither of them are even available to be used in the VGC regulations yet. Don't know why that is. If they're saying that they're just too unbalanced, but they're just Paradox Pokemon. But then this Paradox Raikou that's going to be coming out, I'm already thinking about ways that you can shut down an opponent easily. If you got to use your Thunderclap, you can partner that with like an Urshifu, for example. If the opponent's going to plan on using an attacking move, boom, you got the Thunderclap. It's going to be more priority. I don't know if it's going to be higher priority and Fake Out or not. Who knows? But they can go for that move, and then your Urshifu, if they're going to try to go for Protect, Urshifu goes through that too. So this makes intense opportunities for new combinations and things of the sort. But yet, the new Pokemon is coming out. Obviously, they're not even available yet. But then, even the Paradox Pokemon that they already have released to us, we still can't use them. I don't know why. Not sure what they're thinking about in terms of this, but still can't use them. It is what it is. Maybe they'll put him on some type of restricted list, and you can have to choose one of those or one of another legendary. Who knows what they're planning on doing? But nonetheless, that's the way it actually is right now. But I'm just going to start working on some new teams and trying to get, once the Regulation E is available on Showdown, I'll be building some teams, running some testing, doing some videos on that, trying to get ourselves ready for the next tournament, because I plan on going to the Sacramento, California one, as long as I'm able to walk, because I have an epidural injection that I'm going to have in the weekend of the Peoria, Illinois tournament. So hopefully everything goes well in that regard, and then we will be able to have another video about a prepared team that I'm going to be taking over to Sacramento and testing out the new meta in Regulation E. So, hope you all did in fact enjoy this video. And if you did in fact participate at the Pennsylvania Regional, let me know how you did in the tournament. And of course, if you see me there next time, just go ahead and say hi. And also, make sure that you are letting me know what you are going to be excited for in the next regulation for some of the new Pokemon that are going to be coming out, or if you're hopeful for any certain moves that's going to be actually returning in the Teal Mask. Not necessarily for the later one, the second DLC, because we're talking about for Regulation E, what's going to be released, and the new tournament, that season that's going to be starting up in October. So let me know what your thoughts are, and make sure you like, share, subscribe, and have your notifications turned on so you will be aware of all VGC content that we are going to be uploading here, because we are going to definitely continue to build our capabilities and make it to Worlds. So hope to see you there. But at this time, this is going to be the Raikaze signing off. You all know what to do. You stay strong, you power on, and you swim on. Catch y'all later.